Lyle Hammond stood barefoot in his doorway at dawn, watching the largest woman he had ever seen measure his doorframe for the third time with what looked like a length of knotted rope. She was an orc, broad-shouldered and powerfully built, with green skin that caught the early light like new spring leaves and small tusks that protruded just slightly over her lower lip. Her dark hair was pulled back in a thick braid, and her pointed ears twitched each time she stretched the rope from one side of the frame to the other. Her brow furrowed in concentration that might have been comical if she had not looked so genuinely distressed. "It is wide enough," she muttered to herself in a low, rough voice. "But the height is close, too close. Perhaps if I duck very low or crawling would be safer." Lyle cleared his throat, and she spun around so fast he actually took a step back, his heart jumping in his chest. Her eyes were amber, bright and wild like a cornered animal, and for a moment neither of them moved. He had heard stories all his life about orcs, about their strength and their savagery, about how they raided border settlements and killed without mercy. But this orc, standing in his front yard with a measuring rope in her hands and dirt on her knees, looked more terrified than terrifying. "I'm sorry," she said quickly, her words tumbling over each other. "I did not mean to trespass. I was told this house was empty. I was told no one lived here anymore. I will go. I will leave now." "Wait," Lyle said, holding up his hands. "Who told you it was empty?" She hesitated, her grip tightening on the rope. "The old woman in the village, the one who sells herbs. She said the man who lived here had died last winter and the house stood vacant. She said it was far enough from the main road that no one would bother me if I stayed here for a few days. I have coin. I can pay rent." Lyle felt a pang of understanding. Old Marjorie had been his grandmother's friend, and she had indeed thought he was dead. He had left 3 years ago to fight in the border wars, and when he had not returned by winter, everyone had assumed the worst. He had only made it back to his family's homestead 2 weeks ago, thin and scarred and wanting nothing more than to be left alone. He had not yet ventured into the village to announce his survival. "Marjorie was mistaken," he said carefully. "I'm not dead. I'm Lyle. This is my house." The orc's face fell, and she nodded once, sharply. "Then I apologize for the intrusion. I will be gone before the sun clears the trees." She turned to gather a pack that sat near the fence, a worn leather thing that looked like it had traveled many hard miles, and Lyle found himself speaking before he could think better of it. "Why were you measuring the door frame?" She stopped, her back still to him and her shoulders hunched slightly. When she spoke, her voice was so quiet he almost missed it. "I did not want to break your house just by walking in. Orcs are large. Human houses are small. I have seen it happen before. A door frame collapses, a wall cracks, and then the humans come with torches and pitchforks because we are monsters who destroy everything we touch. I thought if I measured carefully, if I understood the dimensions, I could be careful enough. I could fit without causing damage." Something in Lyle's chest twisted at the sheer dejection in her tone. He looked at his door frame, which was solid oak and had stood for 30 years through storms and snow, and then at the orc, who was admittedly very tall and very broad but not so enormous that she could not fit through a normal door. "You would fit," he said. "You would have to duck a little, but you would fit fine. The frame is strong, you would not break it." She turned her head slightly, not quite looking at him. "You do not know that. I am strong, stronger than I look. I could break it by accident." "Have you broken door frames before?" "No." "But there is always a first time." Lyle found himself almost smiling despite the strangeness of the situation. "What's your name?" She hesitated for a long moment. "Grika." "Grika," he repeated. "Why do you need a place to stay?" Another long pause. "I was cast out from my clan. I cannot go back. I am traveling south, looking for work, looking for a place where perhaps an orc can live without fighting. Marjorie said there were farms here that might need extra hands for the harvest. She said humans here were less hostile than in the north. Lyle thought about the village, about the suspicious looks and the whispered conversations, about how his neighbors would react to an orc walking down their main street. Marjorie was kind but also optimistic to a fault. "It's not that simple," he said. "There's still a lot of fear, a lot of anger. The war is too recent." Grika's shoulders slumped further. "I know, it is the same everywhere, but I have to try. I have to find somewhere." The sun was creeping higher now, turning the sky from gray to gold, and Lyle became acutely aware that he was standing in his doorway in nothing but his sleep trousers talking to an orc woman who looked like she had not had a good night's rest in weeks. He should send her away. He should tell her to leave and never come back. That would be the safe thing, the sensible thing. But he had spent 3 years fighting a war he had not understood, killing people he did not hate, and he was so very tired of being afraid. "You can stay," he said, "just for today. You look exhausted. There's a barn out back that's clean and dry. You can rest there, and tonight you can have a hot meal, and tomorrow morning you can continue south. But you should stay away from the village. People here are not ready for an orc visitor." Grika turned fully now, her amber eyes wide with shock. "You would let me stay, even though I am an orc, just for one day," Lyle repeated, "and only in the barn, not the house." She stared at him for a long moment, and he wondered what she saw. A scarred veteran with too many ghosts in his eyes. A foolish human who did not know when to be properly scared. Whatever it was, she finally nodded. "Thank you," she said, and the gratitude in her voice was so raw it made him uncomfortable. "I will not cause trouble. You will not even know I am here." She gathered her pack and walked toward the barn, moving with a careful grace that surprised him. She did not lumber or stomp. She placed each foot deliberately, as if afraid the very ground might shatter under her weight. Lyle watched her disappear into the barn and then retreated into his house, closing the door firmly behind him and wondering what in all the hells he had just agreed to. The day passed quietly. Lyle worked in his vegetable garden, pulling weeds and checking the tomatoes that were just starting to ripen. He had neglected the place while he was gone, and it had taken weeks of hard labor to get it back into shape. The work was good, though. It kept his hands busy and his mind from wandering to dark places. Every so often he glanced at the barn, but there was no movement, no sound. Grika had meant what she said about being invisible. By late afternoon, Lyle had worked up an appetite and went inside to prepare supper. He made a simple stew with vegetables from the garden and salt pork from his stores, along with bread that was only slightly stale. As the stew simmered, he found himself making far more than he needed for one person. He told himself it was just habit, that he had always cooked for his family and was not used to smaller portions yet. But when he ladled the stew into 2 bowls instead of 1 and cut extra slices of bread, he could not quite lie to himself anymore. He walked to the barn as the sun began to set, carrying the food on a wooden tray. The barn door was open just a crack, and he pushed it wider with his foot. "Grika, I brought food." There was a rustling from the far corner, and then Grika emerged from the shadows. She had been sitting in the hayloft, he realized, as far from the door as possible. She climbed down the ladder with surprising agility and approached him slowly, her eyes fixed on the tray. "You did not have to do this," she said. "I made too much," Lyle said, which was not quite a lie. "It will go to waste otherwise." He set the tray on an old barrel and stepped back, giving her space. She moved forward cautiously, picked up the bowl and smelled the stew. Her eyes closed briefly, and she let out a breath that might have been a sigh or a prayer. "When did you last eat?" Lyle asked. 2 days ago. Some berries in the forest, Before that, 3 days. 5 days with only berries. Lyle felt anger stir in his gut, not at her but at the circumstances that had driven her to this. He said nothing, though, just watched as she ate the stew in careful, controlled bites, as if afraid to show how hungry she truly was. "It is very good," she said between bites. "Thank you." Lyle nodded and found himself sitting on a hay bale, his own bowl in his hands. They ate in silence for a while, the only sounds the scrape of spoons against wood and the distant chirping of evening crickets. "Why did your clan cast you out?" Lyle asked eventually. Grika set her bowl down, now empty. She stared at it for a moment before answering. "I refused to raid a human farm. The war chief said it was necessary, that we needed the supplies, that humans had taken from us first. But the farm he wanted to raid belonged to an old couple. I had seen them before, in the neutral trading post. They had always been kind. They did not deserve to die, so I said no. And when you say no to a war chief, you are no longer part of the clan." "That took courage." She laughed, but it was a bitter sound, or stupidity. "Now I have no clan, no family, no place in the world. Perhaps courage and stupidity are the same thing." Lyle thought about his own choices, about volunteering for a war he could have avoided, about coming back to a homestead that felt too empty now that his parents were gone. "Sometimes they are," he agreed. They talked a little more as the light faded, small things mostly. Grika told him about the trading post where orcs and humans met under a flag of truce to exchange goods. Lyle told her about the garden, about his plans to expand it next year and maybe get some chickens. It was strange how normal it felt, sitting in a barn at dusk talking to an orc woman as if they were simply two people sharing a meal. When full darkness fell, Lyle collected the empty bowls and stood. "I'll leave you to rest. If you need anything, the well is by the east side of the house." "Help yourself." "Lyle," Grika said, and he paused at the barn door. "Why are you being kind to me? You fought in the war, you said so. That means you fought orcs. Perhaps you even killed orcs. Why help one now?" It was a fair question, and Lyle did not have a simple answer. He thought about the young orc soldier he had killed in his first battle, barely older than himself, the look of surprise in his eyes as he fell. He thought about all the other faces that haunted his dreams. "Because the war is over," he said finally. "And I'm tired of fighting, tired of hating. You needed help and I could give it. Maybe that's enough." He did not wait for her response, just walked back to the house and tried not to think too hard about what he was doing. The next morning, Lyle woke to the sound of something crashing in his yard. He bolted out of bed, grabbing the knife he kept by the door, and rushed outside to find Grika standing frozen next to his woodpile, which had partially collapsed. Logs were scattered across the ground, and she was staring at them with an expression of absolute horror. "I am so sorry," she said the moment she saw him. "I was trying to stack them properly. They looked unstable. I thought I could fix it, but I touched them wrong and now I have made it worse and I am so sorry." Lyle looked at the woodpile, which was messy but hardly a disaster, and then at Grika, who looked like she expected him to grab a weapon and chase her off his land. He set the knife down on the porch railing. "It's fine," he said. "It's just wood. I can restack it." "I will restack it," Grika said firmly. "I caused the problem. I will fix it." Before he could argue, she was already picking up the logs and arranging them with a precision that bordered on obsessive. She measured distances with her hands, adjusted angles, tested stability with little pushes. Lyle watched for a moment and then went to help, gathering the scattered pieces and handing them to her. "You do not have to help," Grika said. "This is my mistake. It's my woodpile. I want to help." They worked together in the early morning light, and Lyle found himself noticing things about her. The way her muscles moved under her green skin, powerful but controlled. The small scars on her hands and arms, marks of a hard life. The way she bit her lower lip when she was concentrating, her small tusks pressing into the flesh. She was, he realized with some surprise, beautiful in a way he had never considered before. When the woodpile was restacked, more neatly than it had been in years, Grika stepped back and nodded in satisfaction. There. Better than before. Perhaps I have paid back a small part of your kindness. You were supposed to be resting and moving on this morning, Lyle pointed out. Grika's ears twitched and she looked away. I know, I will gather my things. Unless perhaps you have other tasks, I am strong, I can work. And you are only one person on a large homestead, you could use help. Lyle should have said no. He should have thanked her politely and sent her on her way. But he looked at his fields, at the fence that needed mending and the barn roof that needed patching and the 100 other tasks he had been putting off because there were not enough hours in the day. And he thought about how Grika had measured his door frame 3 times because she was so afraid of causing harm. The fence along the north field is falling down, he said slowly. I have the materials to fix it, but not the time. If you could work on that today, I could pay you with meals and another night in the barn, but only if you want to, and only one more day. The relief on Grika's face was so profound it hurt to see. Yes, I will fix your fence. Show me what needs to be done. Lyle spent the morning showing Grika the fence line and explaining what needed to be repaired. She listened intently, asking smart questions about technique and materials. When he left her to it and returned to his own work, he found himself checking on her progress more often than necessary. She worked with a focused intensity, measuring each post before placing it, testing each nail before hammering it home. The same care she had shown with the door frame, with the woodpile. Always afraid of breaking something. Always trying to be smaller and gentler than she was. At midday, Lyle brought out lunch, bread and cheese and apples. They sat on the grass near the fence and ate, and Grika asked him about the land, about the crops and the weather patterns. She had grown up in the mountains, she said, where the seasons were harsher and the growing time shorter. The gentle rolling hills of his homestead fascinated her. It must be peaceful here, she said, gazing out at the fields, when there is no war, when you are alone. Lonely, Lyle corrected quietly. It's lonely. Grika looked at him and something passed between them, an understanding of solitude and loss. Yes, she said, lonely. That afternoon, Lyle found reasons to work closer to the north field. He told himself he was checking on the quality of the repairs, but really, he just wanted to watch her work, to see the satisfaction on her face each time she completed a section of fence. They talked while they worked, calling back and forth across the field. Small things. The weather. The best way to cook potatoes. Whether chickens were worth the trouble. By evening, the fence was finished, and it was the sturdiest section on the entire homestead. Grika stood back and examined it with critical eyes, testing posts and crossbeams, and finally nodded. It will hold, she announced, even in strong winds, even if livestock press against it. You do good work, Lyle said and meant it. They walked back to the house together, and Lyle made dinner while Grika waited in the yard, still respecting the boundary he had set about not entering the house. But when he brought the food out and suggested they eat on the porch, she hesitated only a moment before joining him on the steps. They sat side by side, their shoulders not quite touching, and watched the sun set over the fields. I should leave tomorrow, Grika said eventually. I should continue south, but I do not want to. Lyle's heart did something complicated in his chest. Why not? Because this is the first place I have felt safe in a very long time. Because you look at me like I am a person, not a monster. Because I like the work, and I like the land, and I like talking to you. She said it simply, without artifice, and Lyle appreciated the honesty even as it terrified him. "There's more work," he said slowly. "The barn roof needs patching. The garden is getting too big for me to manage alone. The chicken coop I was planning to build is not going to build itself." Grika turned to look at him, her amber eyes reflecting the last of the daylight. "You are offering me work, real work. For how long?" "As long as you want to stay. I can't pay much, but I can give you food and shelter and a share of the harvest. And when winter comes, if you're still here, you can move into the house. Into the spare room. The barn will be too cold." "The door frame," Grika said. "I still do not know if I will fit without breaking it." Lyle stood and walked to the door, measuring it with his arms spread wide. "You'll fit, I promise. And if something breaks, we'll fix it together. Things breaking is not the end of the world." Grika stared at him for a long moment, and he could see the war happening behind her eyes. The part of her that wanted to hope fighting with the part that had learned hope was dangerous. Finally, she nodded. "I will stay, for a while, until you grow tired of me." "I don't think that's going to happen," Lyle said, and surprised himself with how much he meant it. The days that followed fell into a rhythm that felt both strange and natural. Grika worked on the barn roof, climbing up the ladder with sure movements, despite her professed fear of breaking things. Lyle tended the garden and began building the chicken coop, with Grika's help in the evenings. They worked well together, developing a silent communication of gestures and glances. When one needed a tool, the other was already handing it over. When one struggled with a task, the other stepped in without being asked. They talked while they worked, the conversations growing deeper as the days passed. Grika told him about her childhood in the mountain clan, about learning to fight and hunt, about the complicated politics of orc society where strength was valued above all else, but so was loyalty to the clan. Lyle told her about his parents, who had died of fever the winter before he left for war, about how he had joined the army partly because he did not want to face the empty house alone. "You came back to it anyway," Grika observed one evening as they sat on the porch after dinner. "I did. I thought maybe enough time had passed. Maybe I would feel different." "Do you?" Lyle considered the question. The house still felt empty, but less so now. The silence was still there, but it was broken by Grika's voice, by the sound of her working in the barn, by her laughter when he said something unexpectedly funny. "Yes," he said. "I think I do." Grika smiled at that, a real smile that showed her tusks fully, and Lyle realized he was staring at her mouth. He looked away quickly, feeling heat rise in his face. This was dangerous territory. She was an orc. He was a human. People did not cross those lines. It was taboo, forbidden, the kind of thing that got people driven out of their communities. But when he glanced back at her, she was still smiling, and he thought maybe dangerous territory was not always a bad place to be. The first real test came on a market day 3 weeks after Grika's arrival. Lyle needed to go into the village to buy supplies he could not make or grow himself. Salt, lamp oil, nails. He planned to go alone and leave Grika at the homestead, but she insisted on coming with him. "I cannot hide forever," she said. "If I am to stay here, I must be known. People must see that I mean no harm." "They're not ready," Lyle warned. "It could get ugly. Then it gets ugly. But I am tired of being afraid. I am tired of measuring door frames and tiptoeing around the world. I am an orc. I am strong. I will not break your house, and I will not let their words break me." There was steel in her voice, and Lyle recognized the courage it took to say those words. He nodded slowly. "All right, but stay close to me, and if anyone threatens you, we leave immediately." They took the wagon into the village, a 40-minute ride down rough roads. Grika sat beside Lyle on the bench, her back straight and her head high, but he could see the tension in her shoulders. When they rolled into the village square, People stopped and stared. Conversations died mid-sentence. A child pointed and was quickly hushed by her mother. Lyle guided the wagon to the general store and helped Grika down, very aware of every eye watching them. He wanted to say something reassuring, but before he could, the door to the store opened and old Marjorie stepped out. "Lyle Hammond," she said, her voice carrying across the square. "I heard you were back from the dead. Took you long enough to come say hello." Her eyes moved to Grika, and her expression shifted to surprise, then understanding. "And you must be the orc girl I sent out to the Hammond place thinking it was empty. I'm glad to see you found shelter after all." The square was dead silent. Everyone was waiting to see how this would play out. Marjorie, for all her oddities, was respected in the village. Her opinion carried weight. "She's working for me," Lyle said clearly, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Helping with the harvest and repairs. She's a good worker and no threat to anyone." Marjorie studied Grika for a long moment, then nodded. "Well, any friend of the Hammonds is welcome in my shop. Come on in, both of you. Let's get you supplied." It was not a rousing endorsement, but it was enough. The tension in the square eased slightly, though the stares and whispers continued. Lyle and Grika followed Marjorie into the store, and Lyle felt some of the tightness in his chest relax. Inside, Marjorie bustled around gathering the items on Lyle's list. "You've caused quite a stir," she said conversationally. "First coming back alive when we all thought you dead, then showing up with an orc. People don't know what to make of it." "People don't have to make anything of it," Lyle said. "It's my business." "That's true enough, but you know how folks are, they'll talk. Some of it won't be kind." "Let them talk," Grika said quietly. It was the first time she had spoken since entering the village, and both Lyle and Marjorie turned to look at her. "I have been talked about my whole life. First for being too weak in my clan, now for being too dangerous among humans. Words are just words. They cannot hurt me unless I let them." Marjorie's expression softened. "You're a wise one, aren't you? Lyle, you keep this girl close. She's got a good head on those green shoulders." They finished the shopping and loaded the supplies into the wagon. As they were preparing to leave, a man approached them. He was middle-aged, with the weathered skin of a farmer, and his face was set in hard lines. "Hammond," he said, ignoring Grika entirely. "I heard you hired an orc. I'm here to tell you that's a mistake. We don't want her kind here. Send her away before there's trouble." Lyle felt Grika tense beside him, but he stepped forward, placing himself slightly between her and the man. "Garrett, I appreciate your concern, but Grika is working for me on my land. She's not bothering anyone. Not yet, but orcs are violent. Everyone knows that. You bring one into our village, you're putting all of us at risk." "I am not violent," Grika said, her voice low and controlled. "I have never harmed a human. I left my clan because I refused to raid human farms. I want only to work and live in peace." Garrett finally looked at her, his eyes cold. "I don't care what you want. You're an orc. That's all I need to know." "That's enough," Lyle said sharply. "Grika has done nothing to you. If you have a problem with my choices, that's between you and me. Leave her out of it." For a moment he thought Garrett might push further, might do something stupid. But Marjorie appeared in the doorway of her shop, arms crossed and expression stern. "Garrett, don't you have fields to tend? Stop harassing my customers and go do something useful." Garrett shot them all a disgusted look but backed away. Lyle helped Grika up onto the wagon and they left the village at a quick pace. Neither of them spoke until they were well down the road. "That could have gone worse," Lyle said finally. "It could have gone better," Grika replied. Her voice was steady, but when Lyle glanced at her, he saw the hurt in her eyes. "I'm sorry," he said. "Garrett is an ass. Not everyone is like him. Enough are. Enough that it does not matter if a few are kind. The kind ones do not change the world." Lyle wanted to argue, but he could not. She was right. One friendly shopkeeper and one ex-soldier willing to offer work did not erase centuries of hatred and fear. They rode the rest of the way in silence, and when they reached the homestead, Grika immediately went to the barn and did not emerge for the rest of the day. Lyle let her have her space, but when evening came he made dinner and carried it to the barn. He found her sitting in the hayloft again, staring out the small window at the darkening sky. "I brought food," he said, climbing the ladder. "I am not hungry. You need to eat anyway." Grika sighed but accepted the bowl. They sat together in the hayloft, the hay soft beneath them, and ate in silence for a while. "You want me to leave?" Grika asked eventually. "If I am causing you problems in the village, if people are angry with you because of me, I can go." "I do not want to make your life harder." "No," Lyle said immediately. "I don't want you to leave. Garrett was a problem before you arrived, and he'll be a problem after. That's not your fault. But I am a problem. I am an orc. That alone is enough to cause trouble." Lyle set his bowl aside and turned to face her fully. "You're not a problem, Grika. You're a person. A good person who works hard and tries to be kind. If people can't see that, that's their failure, not yours." Grika's eyes glistened, and for a moment Lyle thought she might cry. But she blinked hard and looked away. "Why do you believe in me? You barely know me." "I know enough. I know you refuse to hurt innocent people even when it cost you everything. I know you measured my doorframe 3 times because you were so afraid of causing damage. I know you work harder than anyone I've ever met and never complain. That's enough. You are a strange man, Lyle Hammond, maybe, but you're stuck with me now." Grika laughed, a watery sound, and then did something that surprised them both. She leaned over and rested her head on his shoulder. Lyle froze for a moment, then slowly brought his arm up to wrap around her shoulders. She was warm and solid against him, and he could feel the steady rhythm of her breathing. "Thank you," she whispered, "for seeing me." They sat like that as the darkness deepened, and Lyle felt something shift inside him. This was more than just offering shelter to someone in need. This was more than kindness or charity. This was something deeper, something that scared him almost as much as it exhilarated him. He was falling for her. For an orc woman who measured door frames and fixed fences with painstaking care and smiled with her tusks showing when she was truly happy. He was falling for her, and he had no idea what to do about it. Summer deepened into its richest weeks, and the homestead thrived under their combined efforts. The garden produced more vegetables than Lyle could have managed alone, and Grika took to canning and preserving with the same intense focus she brought to everything. The chicken coop was completed and filled with a dozen hens that Grika named individually and spoke to in the mornings. The barn roof no longer leaked. The fences were all repaired. They worked together from dawn until dusk and spent the evenings on the porch, talking about everything and nothing. Grika was teaching Lyle words in the orcish tongue, guttural and harsh-sounding, but somehow beautiful when she spoke them. Lyle was teaching Grika to read, and she approached the lessons with such hunger for knowledge that he found himself going into the village more often to borrow books from Marjorie's small lending library. The villagers were slowly, grudgingly, accepting Grika's presence. She accompanied Lyle to market every week now, always quiet and polite, never giving anyone reason to complain. Some people still stared or whispered, but others were starting to nod in greeting. Marjorie had taken to giving Grika small gifts, a ribbon for her hair one week, a bar of nice soap the next. It was not much, but it was progress. Through it all, the tension between Lyle and Grika continued to build. Their hands brushed when passing tools. Their eyes met across the garden and held a moment too long. When they sat together on the porch, the space between them grew smaller each night. Neither of them spoke about it, but it hung in the air like the heavy heat before a summer storm. The storm finally broke on a day in late August when Lyle was showing Grika how to repair a broken wagon wheel. They were close together, his hands guiding hers on the tools, and when she turned to ask a question, her face was suddenly just inches from his. They both froze. "Lyle," Grika said softly, uncertainly. He should have pulled away. He should have made a joke or changed the subject or done anything other than what he did, which was to lean forward and kiss her. Her tusks pressed gently against his lips, strange and new but not unpleasant. For a moment Grika did not respond, and Lyle's heart sank with the certainty that he had made a terrible mistake. But then she was kissing him back, her large hands coming up to cup his face with surprising gentleness, and everything else fell away. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Grika's eyes were wide with shock. "You kissed me," she said, as if she could not quite believe it. "I did. I'm sorry. I should have asked first. I should have. Do it again." Lyle blinked. "What? Kiss me again, please. I want to be sure it was real." So he did, slower this time, taking the opportunity to really feel it. The warmth of her mouth, the softness of her lips despite the tusks, the way her hands trembled slightly as they held him. When they broke apart the second time, Grika was smiling. "It was real," she said wonderingly. "You kissed me. You, a human man, kissed me, an orc." "Is that all right?" Lyle asked, suddenly worried. "I mean, do orcs? Is kissing something you do?" "We do. But I never thought a human would want to kiss an orc." "I never thought anyone would want to kiss me." "Why not?" "You're beautiful," Grika laughed, but it was a stunned sound. "I am an orc. We are not beautiful. We are strong and we are fierce, but we are not beautiful. You are to me. You've been beautiful to me for weeks now." "I just didn't know how to say it." Grika's eyes filled with tears, and she pulled him into a tight embrace. Lyle wrapped his arms around her, feeling the strength in her body and the vulnerability in her shaking shoulders. "I thought I was alone," she whispered into his neck. "I thought I would always be alone, an outcast with no clan, no family, no place. But then I found you and you let me stay and you look at me like I matter. Like I am more than just an orc who is too weak for her clan and too dangerous for humans." "You matter," Lyle said fiercely. "You matter so much. I don't know when it happened, but somewhere between you measuring the doorframe and now I fell in love with you." Grika pulled back to look at him, searching his face. "Love, you love me." "Yes, is that all right?" Instead of answering, she kissed him again, and Lyle took that as a yes. They spent the rest of the day in a daze, working side by side but stealing glances and touches whenever they could. When evening came, they sat closer than ever on the porch, Grika's hand in Lyle's, and watched the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink. "What happens now?" Grika asked quietly. "What do you mean? You love me. I love you, but we are an orc and a human. People will not accept this. The village already barely tolerates my presence. If they knew we were together, truly together, it would be worse. You could lose everything." Lyle had been thinking about this all afternoon, turning it over in his mind. She was right. There would be consequences. The village would be scandalized. He might lose friends, might face hostility, might even be pushed out of the community entirely. But when he weighed that against the thought of losing Grika, the choice was clear. "Then we deal with it," he said. "Together. I'm not giving you up, Grika. I've spent too many years fighting other people's wars, living other people's expectations. This homestead is mine. My life is mine, and I choose to share it with you if you'll have me." Grika squeezed his hand so hard it almost hurt. "Yes, yes, I will have you. I will stand with you no matter what comes." They sealed the promise with another kiss, and for the first time since returning from the war, Lyle felt truly at peace. The harvest came, and with it, a flood of work that left both Lyle and Grika exhausted but satisfied. They brought in potatoes and onions, tomatoes and beans, squash and carrots. The root cellar filled with preserved food, enough to see them through the winter and beyond. The chickens were laying well, and Grika had talked Lyle into getting a milk cow, a gentle old thing named Buttercup that she doted on shamelessly. In the quiet moments between the work, they learned each other. Lyle discovered that Grika was terrified of spiders, despite being 3 times their size. Grika learned that Lyle had nightmares about the war and woke sometimes in the night shaking and confused. They shared their fears and their past traumas, and in the sharing, found healing. One night, as the first cool edge of autumn crept into the air, Grika brought up a question that had been hovering between them. "When will I move into the house?" Lyle looked up from the book he had been reading aloud. They were on the porch as usual, Grika leaning against him, his arm around her shoulders. "You want to move in? You said when winter came if I was still here I could have the spare room. Winter is coming, and I am still here." "You could have more than the spare room," Lyle said carefully. "You could have my room with me if you wanted." Grika was quiet for a long moment. "You are asking me to share your bed." "Yes, but only if you want to. There's no pressure. We can take this as slow as you need." "I want to," Grika said softly, "but I am also afraid." "Of what?" "Of the door frame." She laughed at his confused expression. I know, you have told me 100 times that I will fit, but it is more than that. The door frame is a symbol. It is the barrier between being a guest and being home. As long as I stay in the barn, I am still apart from you. I am still just someone passing through. But if I walk through that door, if I move into your house, into your room, into your life completely, then I am admitting this is real. This is permanent. And if I lose it after that, it will break me. Lyle set the book aside and turned to face her fully. "Grika, you're not going to lose this. You're not going to lose me. I'm not asking you to move in because I think it's a nice idea. I'm asking because I want to build a life with you. A real life. The kind that lasts. You cannot promise that. No one can. You're right. I can't promise that nothing bad will ever happen, but I can promise that I will fight for us. Every single day. I can promise that I love you more than I've ever loved anyone. And I can promise that when you walk through that door frame, you will not break it because it was built to last, just like we are." Grika's eyes shimmered with tears. "You are making it very hard to stay afraid. Good, be brave instead. Be brave like you were when you refused to raid that farm. Be brave like you were when you came with me to the village. Be brave and walk through the door with me." Grika stood, pulling Lyle up with her. They walked to the front door together, and Grika paused on the threshold. Lyle could feel her trembling, could see the war happening behind her eyes. Then she took a deep breath, ducked her head slightly, and stepped through. The doorframe held. Of course it did. It was solid oak, built to withstand far more than one orc woman crossing the threshold. Grika stood in the entryway and looked around at the house she had seen only from the outside. It was simple and clean, with worn furniture and shelves full of books. There were no decorations, no personal touches. It looked like what it was, the home of a man who had been living alone and had not thought he would ever share it. "It needs work," Lyle said, suddenly self-conscious. "I've been meaning to fix things up, but I never had a reason before." "We will fix it together," Grika said. She turned in a slow circle, taking everything in, and then smiled. "It is a good house. It feels like you, safe and sturdy and kind." Lyle showed her around what little there was to see. The main room with its fireplace and kitchen area. The spare bedroom that was currently being used for storage. And finally, his own bedroom, small and plain, with a large bed and a chest for clothes. "This is where I sleep," he said unnecessarily. "It is where we will sleep," Grika corrected. She sat on the edge of the bed, testing it. "Will it hold both of us? I am heavy. It'll hold. It was my parents' bed. It's sturdy." Grika nodded and then looked up at him, vulnerable and open in a way he had never seen her. "I have never done this before, shared a bed with someone, shared a life. You will have to teach me." Lyle sat beside her and took her hand. "We'll figure it out together. That's how everything works best." They did figure it out, though not without awkwardness. That first night, they both laid stiffly on their respective sides of the bed, hyper-aware of each other's presence. But over the following days and weeks, they relaxed into it. They learned how to navigate the space, how to wake up tangled together without it being uncomfortable, how to share the mundane intimacies of daily life. Grika brought her few belongings in from the barn, though she insisted on cleaning and organizing the space obsessively before considering herself fully moved in. They cooked together in the small kitchen, Grika standing at the stove while Lyle chopped vegetables, moving around each other in a dance that became more fluid with practice. They read together in the evenings, Grika's reading skills improving rapidly. They planned for the future, talking about expanding the garden next year, maybe getting a few pigs, possibly planting an orchard. It was domestic and simple and absolutely perfect. The first real challenge to their happiness came in early October, when Lyle received an unexpected visitor. He was out mending a section of fence when a rider approached, a young man in military uniform. Lyle's stomach sank as he recognized the insignia. The army was recruiting again. "Lyle Hammond," the rider asked, dismounting. "That's me. I'm here on behalf of Captain Reeves. He's putting together a special unit to patrol the northern border. He remembered your service and requested you specifically. The pay is good and it's only a 6-month commitment." Lyle did not even hesitate. "No, I'm done with the army." The rider looked surprised. "Sir, this is a direct request from a superior officer, and the northern situation is serious. There have been orc raids." "I said no." Lyle's voice was hard. "I served my time. I'm not going back." "May I ask why?" "The captain said you were one of the best soldiers he commanded." Before Lyle could answer, Grika appeared from around the side of the house, carrying a basket of eggs. She stopped when she saw the soldier, her expression cautious. The soldier's eyes went wide. "You have an orc on your property," he said, his hand moving toward his weapon. "I have an orc in my home," Lyle corrected, stepping between them. "And if you draw that weapon, you're going to have a very short conversation." The soldier looked between Lyle and Grika, understanding dawning on his face. "You're living with an orc. Sir, that's treason. That's consorting with the enemy. The war is over. There is no enemy. There's just a woman I love and a life I'm trying to build. Tell Captain Reeves I appreciate the offer, but my answer is no, and tell him not to send anyone else. I won't change my mind." The soldier stared at him for a long moment, then shook his head in disgust. "The captain was right about you. You were a good soldier. It's a shame you've thrown that away for a monster." Lyle's hands clenched into fists, but before he could respond, Grika spoke. "Please go," she said quietly. "You have delivered your message. There is no need to make this worse." The soldier mounted his horse and rode away without another word. Lyle watched him go, his heart pounding with anger and adrenaline. When the rider was out of sight, he turned to Grika. "I'm sorry you had to hear that." "Monster," Grika repeated, her voice hollow. "That is what he sees when he looks at me. He's wrong. He's an ignorant fool and he's wrong." "Is he? I am an orc. My people and his people are at war. Maybe what we are doing is wrong. Maybe it is treason." Lyle grabbed her shoulders, forcing her to look at him. "No, don't let his words poison what we have. We are not wrong. Loving you is not wrong. It's the most right thing I've ever done." Grika nodded, but the light had gone out of her eyes. They went through the rest of the day in a subdued mood, the soldier's words hanging over them like a dark cloud. That night, Grika lay awake long after Lyle had fallen asleep, staring at the ceiling and wondering if she was being selfish. If by staying, by loving him, she was putting him in danger. The next morning, Lyle woke to find Grika already up and dressed. She was sitting at the kitchen table, her hands folded in front of her, her expression serious. "We need to talk," she said. Lyle's stomach dropped. Those 4 words had never preceded anything good. He sat across from her and waited. "I have been thinking about what the soldier said," Grika began. "About treason. About you throwing away your reputation and your future for me. He was not entirely wrong. By being with me, you are making yourself an outcast. The village already looks at you strangely. The army will not take you back. Other humans will see you as a traitor. I don't care about any of that. But you should. You have a life here, a place in this community. I do not want to be the reason you lose that." Lyle reached across the table and took her hands. "Grika, listen to me. I had a place in this community before you came, and I was miserable. I was alone and haunted and barely holding on. You didn't take anything from me. You gave me everything. You gave me a reason to wake up in the morning. You gave me laughter and companionship and love. You gave me a future I actually want to live. If the village can't accept that, if the army thinks I'm a traitor, then that's their problem, not mine. But what if it becomes your problem? What if they try to force you to leave? What if they hurt you because of me? Then we'll deal with it, together. Grika, you can't spend your whole life being afraid of what might happen. At some point you have to take the risk. You have to step through the doorframe." Grika's eyes filled with tears. "I am so afraid of losing you." "I'm afraid of losing you too, but fear is not a good enough reason to give up on something this important, is it?" She shook her head slowly. "No, it is not." She took a shaky breath and squeezed his hands. "I will stay, I will be brave, but promise me something. Anything. Promise me that if it ever becomes too much, if staying with me ever truly endangers you, you will tell me. You will not sacrifice yourself for me. I promise. But only if you promise the same thing. We're partners in this. We protect each other. I promise." They sealed the agreement with a kiss. And though the fear did not entirely disappear, it became manageable. They would face whatever came together, and that made all the difference. As autumn deepened and the leaves turned gold and red, Lyle and Grika settled into a rhythm of contentment. They worked on winterizing the homestead, stacking firewood and sealing drafts in the walls. They made preserves and smoked meat, preparing for the cold months ahead. In the evenings, they sat by the fire, and Grika would tell stories of her childhood in the mountains while Lyle listened, enthralled by the glimpses into a world he had never known. The village slowly, grudgingly, continued to accept Grika's presence. She had proven herself to be hardworking and harmless, and even some of the more suspicious residents had softened their stance. Marjorie had become a genuine friend, inviting Grika into her shop for tea and conversation. A few of the other women had started nodding to her in greeting at the market. It was not acceptance exactly, but it was tolerance, and that was progress. But there were still those who hated her, and Garrett was chief among them. He made no secret of his disdain, loudly proclaiming in the tavern that Lyle was a traitor and that the orc woman would bring ruin to them all. Most people ignored him, but his words found fertile ground in a few hearts, and a small group of like-minded men began meeting to discuss what should be done about the problem. Lyle and Grika heard the rumors, but tried not to let them trouble them. They focused on their own lives, their own happiness, and tried to trust that reason would prevail. But on a cold night in November, reason went out the window. Lyle woke to the smell of smoke. He bolted upright, his soldier's instincts screaming alarm, and shook Grika awake. "Fire," he said. "The barn is on fire." They rushed outside to find the barn engulfed in flames, the old dry wood burning with terrifying speed. Lyle ran for the well, grabbing buckets, but it was already too late. The structure was beyond saving. All they could do was watch as it burned, the heat intense even from a distance. "The animals," Grika said suddenly, and Lyle's heart stopped. They had moved Buttercup and the chickens into the barn for the night to protect them from a coming cold snap. "No." He started toward the barn, but Grika grabbed him. "You cannot. It is too hot. You will die." "I can't just let them burn." But even as he said it, he knew she was right. The barn was an inferno. Nothing inside could have survived. He stood helpless and furious as the building collapsed in on itself, sending up a shower of sparks that lit the night sky. It was only when the fire had burned down to embers that they saw the message. Someone had used stones to spell out words in the dirt near the house. "Monsters burn." Lyle felt a cold rage settle over him. This was not an accident. This was deliberate. Someone had come to their home in the night and set fire to their barn, killing their animals and destroying their property. And he knew exactly who was responsible. "Garrett," he said, his voice flat and dangerous. Grika put a hand on his arm. "You do not know that for certain." "Who else? He's been stirring up trouble for months. He probably brought his friends." "Even if he did, what will you do? You cannot prove it. And if you confront him, it will only make things worse." Lyle wanted to argue, wanted to storm into the village and demand justice, but he knew Grika was right. He had no proof, only suspicion. And any action he took would likely provoke exactly the kind of escalation they had been trying to avoid. They spent the rest of the night watching the embers, making sure the fire did not spread to the house. As dawn broke, the full extent of the damage became clear. The barn was gone, reduced to a smoking pile of charred wood and ash. With it went their tools, their supplies, and their animals. It was a devastating loss, both practically and emotionally. Grika stood staring at the ruins, her expression blank. Lyle came to stand beside her, slipping his hand into hers. "We'll rebuild," he said. "It's just a building. We can build a new one." "They killed Buttercup," Grika said, her voice breaking. "She was old and gentle and never hurt anyone. They killed her because they hate me. They killed her because they're cowards who attack in the night when no one can see them. It is because of me. You know it is. If I were not here, this would not have happened. Garrett would have no reason to hate you." Lyle turned her to face him, his hands on her shoulders. "No, we are not doing this. We are not letting them win by driving you away. That's what they want. They want you to leave so they can feel like they've protected the village from the scary orc. But you're not the problem, they are. And I will not give them the satisfaction of seeing you run. But how do we fight this? They came to our home. They destroyed our property. What is to stop them from doing worse?" It was a valid question, and Lyle did not have a good answer. They could report the incident to the village council, but without proof, nothing would come of it. They could try to guard the property every night, but that was not sustainable. Or they could leave, find somewhere else to start over where no one knew them. But Lyle was not ready to give up his family's land, and he did not think running would solve the problem anyway. Hatred had a way of following. The answer came from an unexpected source. That afternoon, Marjorie arrived at the homestead with a wagon full of supplies. Behind her came a half-dozen other villagers, all carrying tools and materials. "We heard what happened," Marjorie said, climbing down from the wagon, "and we're here to help rebuild." Lyle stared at them in shock. "You are. Not all of us agree with Garrett and his cronies," said Thomas, one of the younger farmers. "Most of us don't, actually. What they did was criminal. It was wrong. And we want you to know that you're not alone." Another woman, Anna, stepped forward. "Grika has been nothing but kind since she came here. She works hard, she's polite, she keeps to herself. There's no reason to treat her like a monster, and we're ashamed that someone from our village did this." Grika looked overwhelmed, her eyes bright with unshed tears. "You would help us." "Even though I am an orc. You're a member of this community," Marjorie said firmly. "That makes you one of us, and we take care of our own." Over the next week, the villagers came in shifts to help clear the wreckage and begin building a new barn. They brought supplies and food, refusing to accept payment. They worked alongside Lyle and Grika, laughing and talking and treating Grika with a warmth that left her speechless. It was not everyone from the village, but it was enough. Enough to show that kindness could outweigh hatred, that community could overcome fear. Garrett and his friends stayed away, but Lyle knew this was not over. Men like Garrett did not give up easily. But for now, surrounded by people who had chosen to see Grika as a person rather than a monster, Lyle felt something like hope. The new barn took shape slowly, and with it came a new sense of belonging for Grika. She was no longer just tolerated. She was welcomed. Children from the village started coming by to see her, fascinated by the strong orc woman who could lift beams that took 3 men to carry. Grika was awkward with them at first, unsure how to interact with human children, but they were persistent and fearless in the way only children could be. Soon, she was teaching them how to identify edible plants and showing them the proper way to care for chickens. By the time the first snow fell, the new barn stood complete, larger and sturdier than the old one. They had acquired new animals with money raised by the villagers, a young cow they named Clover, and a new flock of chickens. Life had returned to a new kind of normal, one that felt more stable than before, because it was built on the support of a community, rather than just their own determination. Winter settled in hard and cold, and Lyle was grateful for the work they had done to prepare. The house stayed warm thanks to a well-stocked woodpile, and they had plenty of food stored away. The long dark evenings were spent by the fire, Grika working on a quilt she was making while Lyle read aloud from whatever book they had borrowed from Marjorie. Sometimes they would just sit in comfortable silence, content to be together. On the longest night of the year, the winter solstice, Lyle decided to give Grika the gift he had been working on for weeks. It was a simple thing, a carved wooden figurine of an orc woman. He was not a skilled carver, and the proportions were a bit off, but he had poured love into every detail. The tusks, the pointed ears, the strong shoulders. He had tried to capture Grika as he saw her, beautiful and brave. He gave it to her after dinner, suddenly nervous. "It's not much," he said, "but I wanted you to have something that shows how I see you." Grika held the figurine carefully, turning it over in her hands. Her expression was unreadable, and for a moment Lyle worried he had made a mistake. Then she looked up at him with tears streaming down her face. "It is beautiful," she whispered. "No one has ever made anything for me before. No one has ever thought I was worth the effort." "You're worth everything," Lyle said, pulling her into his arms. "You're worth the barn fire and the hatred and all the difficulties. You're worth it all and more." Grika held him tightly, the figurine clutched in one hand. "I love you, Lyle Hammond. I love you so much it frightens me. I love you too, and I have something else to say." He pulled back just enough to look at her. "I want you to marry me." Grika's eyes went wide. "Marry you, Lyle? We cannot marry. Human and orc marriages are not recognized. There is no legal standing for such a thing." "I don't care about legal standing. I care about you and me and the life we're building. We can have our own ceremony, make our own vows. It doesn't matter if anyone else recognizes it. We'll know what it means." "A wedding," Grika said slowly, testing the word. "You want to have a wedding with me?" "Yes, will you marry me, Grika? Will you be my wife in every way that matters?" Grika started laughing and crying at the same time, nodding so hard her braid bounced. "Yes, yes, I will marry you. I will be your wife. I will stand with you forever." They kissed then, deep and passionate, sealing the promise. When they finally broke apart, Grika was smiling wider than Lyle had ever seen. "When?" she asked. "When will we do this?" "Spring," Lyle said. "When the world comes back to life. When everything is green and growing. We'll have a ceremony here on the homestead, and we'll invite everyone who has been kind to us. We'll celebrate our love and our future." "Spring," Grika agreed. "I can wait until spring." The winter passed slowly, made bearable by their plans and their love. They designed their ceremony carefully, combining human and orc traditions into something uniquely theirs. Grika taught Lyle the orcish vows, which spoke of strength and loyalty and protection. Lyle shared the human vows, which spoke of love and partnership and devotion. They would blend them together, creating something new, when spring finally arrived, melting the snow and coaxing green shoots from the earth. Preparations began in earnest. Marjorie helped Grika make a dress, simple but beautiful, dyed green to match her skin. The villagers who had helped rebuild the barn volunteered to help set up for the ceremony, arranging seating in the yard and decorating with early wildflowers. Even some of Grika's reading students insisted on helping, their enthusiasm impossible to resist. The day of the wedding dawned clear and warm, the kind of perfect spring day that felt like a blessing. Lyle dressed in his best clothes, his hands shaking slightly as he buttoned his shirt. He had faced enemy soldiers without flinching, but the prospect of standing before Grika and proclaiming his love in front of witnesses terrified him in a completely different way. When he stepped outside, he found the yard transformed. Flowers decorated every surface, and chairs were arranged in neat rows facing a simple arch that Thomas had built. Villagers were already arriving, more than Lyle had expected. Not everyone, but enough. Enough to show that their love was recognized, even if it was not legal. Marjorie appeared at his elbow, grinning. "Nervous, terrified," Lyle admitted. "Good, that means you're taking this seriously." She patted his arm. "Grika is almost ready. She looks stunning, by the way. You're a lucky man, I know." The ceremony was simple but profound. Grika emerged from the house, and Lyle's breath caught at the sight of her. The green dress complemented her skin perfectly, and she had woven flowers into her braid. She looked radiant and nervous and absolutely beautiful. She walked toward him with careful steps, as if she was still afraid of breaking something, and when she reached him, he took her hands and smiled. "You look amazing," he whispered. "You are not so bad yourself," she whispered back, her tusks showing in a smile. Marjorie officiated, reading the vows they had written and guiding them through the ceremony. When it came time for them to speak, Lyle went first. "Grika, you came into my life when I had given up on finding happiness. You showed me that strength and gentleness can exist in the same person. You taught me that love is not about finding someone perfect, but about finding someone worth fighting for. I promise to stand by you, to protect you, to honor you for all the days of my life. You are my partner, my best friend, and my love." Grika's eyes were wet, but her voice was steady when she spoke. "Lyle, you saw me when others saw only a monster. You gave me a home when I had nowhere to go. You measured the doorframe for me and promised it would hold, and it did, just like you promised. You are my safety and my joy. I promise to be your strength when you are weak, your courage when you are afraid, your love when you need it most. I will walk beside you through all the seasons of our lives." They exchanged simple rings that Lyle had commissioned from the village blacksmith, bands of silver etched with both human and orcish symbols. When Marjorie finally announced them wed, the crowd erupted in applause, and Lyle pulled Grika into a kiss that was both tender and triumphant. The celebration that followed was filled with food and music and laughter. The villagers who had come brought gifts, practical things mostly like tools and seeds and preserves, but each one was given with genuine warmth. Children ran wild in the yard, playing games that involved lots of shouting and not many rules. Grika was pulled into conversation after conversation, and Lyle watched with pride as she laughed and talked, finally fully at ease among humans. As the sun began to set, and the celebration wound down, Lyle and Grika stood together on the porch, watching their friends depart with waves and well wishes. When the last wagon had disappeared down the road and they were finally alone, Grika turned to him with a satisfied sigh. "We did it," she said. "We got married. We are husband and wife." "How does it feel?" Lyle asked. Grika considered the question. "Like coming home, like finally belonging somewhere, like all the door frames in the world could never keep me out because this is where I am meant to be." Lyle kissed her softly. "Welcome home, wife. Thank you for building a home with me, husband." They went inside together, Grika ducking her head slightly out of old habit even though she no longer needed to, and closed the door on the world outside. Whatever challenges came next, they would face them together. They had proven that love could bridge the divide between orc and human, that fear could be overcome with courage, and that sometimes the most important thing you could do was measure the door frame and trust that it would hold. And it did hold. Through that spring and into summer, through harvest and another winter, through years of building their life together. They expanded the farm, taking on more land and more animals. They became fixtures in the village, the strange couple that somehow worked. Grika became known as the best teacher in the region, her reading classes expanding to include not just children but adults who had never learned. Lyle served on the village council, his voice respected even by those who had initially opposed him. More orcs began to drift into the area, hearing stories of a place where an orc could live among humans without fear. Some stayed, some moved on, but each one was welcomed at the Hammond homestead for as long as they needed. Lyle and Grika became a symbol of what was possible when people chose understanding over hatred. Years passed, and their love only deepened. They grew older together, their faces gaining lines and their hands growing weathered with work. But they never stopped looking at each other with wonder, never stopped being grateful for the day Grika measured that doorframe 3 times and decided to take the risk. On an evening in late spring, many years after their wedding, they sat together on the porch as they had done countless times before. The sun was setting over fields they had planted together, and the sound of children's laughter drifted from the village. Not their own children, for that was not possible, but the many children they had helped raise and teach over the years. "You ever regret it?" Lyle asked. "Staying here with me? You could have kept traveling south. You might have found somewhere easier." Grika took his hand, her grip still strong despite her age. "Never. Not for a single moment. You gave me more than a home, Lyle. You gave me myself. You showed me I did not have to be afraid of breaking things, that I could be strong and gentle at the same time. You loved me when I did not know I could be loved. I would not trade this life for anything." "I love you," Lyle said, the words as true as they had been the first time he spoke them. "I love you too. Thank you for measuring the door frame with me all those years ago. Thank you for trusting it would hold." "It held," Lyle said, smiling. "We held, and we always will." They sat together as the stars emerged one by one, 2 souls who had found each other against all odds and built something beautiful from the broken pieces of their past lives. The door frame had held, the house had stood strong, and their love had proven that sometimes the most important thing you could do was take a chance on someone who measured 3 times before stepping through, worried they might break your world just by entering it. In the end, she had not broken his world. She had made it whole.